Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
Hello, I'm Michael Seaman and welcome to Brampton, Memories of a Small Town. Although in today's show we will not be leaving what is known today as Brampton, we will be going far beyond the boundaries of the former town. Specifically, we'll be going to the old Odlum farmhouse near Tullamore village in the former township of Toronto Gore, which in 1973 merged with the town of Brampton, parts of the townships of Chinguacousy and Toronto to form the city of Brampton. The Odlum House is rich in architectural and military history. It's probably one of the most significant heritage homes in the region of Peel. Captain Abraham Odlum fought with the Duke of Wellington in the Peninsular War against Napoleon at the turn of the 18th century. It was as a result of Odlum's military service that he received a royal land grant in the Gore Township, where the house now stands. It is surmised that it was Captain Odlum's son who built the home, now standing in the Toronto Gore, since Captain Odlum died in 1838. As with other pioneers, however, it is possible that Captain Abraham Odlum lived on the property in a log or frame house before the current structure was built. The Odlum family was long one of the most prestigious families in the township. Legend has it that the name of the nearby village of Tullamore was christened by Captain Odlum after his birthplace in County Offaly, Ireland. In 1837, he was involved as a loyalist in the Mackenzie Rebellion, and in this century, his grandson, General Victor Odlum, led the 2nd Canadian Division in the Second World War. The Odlum family and their house are part of the fascinating history of the township of Toronto Gore. To learn more about the Odlums and the township, I talked with long-time Gore residents and historians, Mayor Peter Robertson and George Tavender, author of the definitive history of the Toronto Gore from this year hence. Mr. Tavender, according to your book, you say that Tullamore was a thriving village at one time.
Well, it was supposed to be they hoped at one time that the railroad would run through there. Mm-hmm. But the plans were changed and went through Malton instead. Mm-hmm. So this has spoiled the plans for a large development there, so eventually just gradually tapered away, petered away, you know.
At one time, my understanding is that the village of Tullamore had more people in it than the village of Brampton. And that historic decision to make the railway go through Brampton instead of Tullamore changed the whole course of events. Mm-hmm. In that Brampton started to grow with the impact of the transportation network.
Yes, that's true. Tullamore
declined.
Well, it changed over then naturally, yes, it would. And of course, as we know, Tullamore is at this present time. It's just a matter of a station garage there, I believe. That's all at present time.
In the old days, George, I think the farmers would bring their grain to Tullamore, and it was sort of a catchment area, and there was a furniture factory and major producer of chickens and a tavern, of course, and a hotel.
Yeah, it's on the northeast corner. That's where the large mill was situated, and that's where all the grain came down there to be done, whatever they wanted to do.
And the garage that you and I know as the Grant's garage has recently disappeared, and it's now just a set of gas pumps, which with a modern variety stores, which
yes, that's right.
Rather sad to see that bit of heritage disappear. I was lucky enough to get a original painting done by Andy Donato of the Grant and Sons garage and little village store, and I've got that proudly in my recreation room.
Yes, there was a blacksmith shop too on the northwest, on the southeast corner there. And of course, St. Mary's Church was there. The cemetery is still there, but St. Mary's Church was demolished back in 1925.
I've heard there is a famous legend from the early days of the Gore about one of the Odlums and a tree. Could you tell us about that, please?
There was a tree in the middle of the road, now called 17 Side Road, right approximately at Goreway Drive, within sight of the Odlum home. It was a big elm tree, and the cars, or the carts, the horse and buggies had to go on either side of the tree. They couldn't go around it, and for many years the roads department was wanting to take it down. But the interesting story was that this was almost a midway point between the Protestant community of Tullamore and the Catholic community of Wildfield. And on July the 11th, when the Protestants had the Orange Parade and other events to celebrate that event, the two communities, the Catholic and Protestants, would meet at the Billy's Tree, King Billy's Tree, and there are lots of stories about the potential confrontations. But knowing that some of the families, as we do, I heard some good stories of how, although those tensions were there, they used to go to dances with each other at the Orange Fellows Hall in Tullamore and other events like that. So it was a little tension at times, especially on July the 11th, but they also mixed together and were quite sane.
The success of the pioneering Odlum family was reflected in the elegant Georgian architecture of their home on the Odlum farm. The decorative brickwork, classical doorway, and the ornate spindles under the eaves are all marks of quality workmanship. Unfortunately, in the late 1970s, after many years of neglect, the Odlum house was in danger of falling apart. It would have certainly been demolished had it not been for the vision of Bill and Rita Wybenga, who, while commuting from Brampton to Bolton, spotted the Odlum house and immediately realized that beneath the years of dirt and paint was a hidden architectural gem. A few years later, with the Odlum farm now subdivided, the Wybengas noticed that the Odlum house was for sale, and they immediately snapped it up. From the beginning, the Wybengas had intended on returning the house to its former glory, and so they began a careful restoration of their home, which has continued through to this day. The restored Odlum home is now a credit to their efforts, and has returned to its century-old status of one of the most attractive homes in Peel. We're now talking to Bill and Rita Wybenga outside of their home. What was it about the Odlum house which initially stirred your interest?
Well, we'd been interested in older homes for a long time. Seen some in the area being torn down, and I'd noticed this house on my way to work in Bolton several years prior to that. One day passing through the area, we saw it again and saw that it was for sale, and realized it was on a subdivision now, that it would not be torn down anymore, that we could buy it on a lot and didn't have to worry about a big development coming in and having to sell out and knock it down. So knowing how much work was ahead, it made a good plan then to have it on a subdivision lot. And obviously it was a historic home, we could tell that. We didn't know at that time much about it, but we started to investigate the possibilities of purchasing it at that time, and that was 7 years ago, I think.
87.
The house has quite an interesting history to it, doesn't it?
From what we've heard, yes, and what we've found out since, we've read some articles. Apparently Captain Abraham Odlum was quite a character from what we've heard, yes.
What sort of condition was it in when you purchased it?
Well, the condition is very, very hard to describe. Where we're standing right now was a parking garage with probably about 3 feet of tires and bicycle frames and car parts in it. And strewn about the yard were half a dozen cars, more bicycles and car wheels and batteries than you could ever imagine. We hauled, I think it was 40 cubic yard containers out of here full of scrap and garbage. And the most common comment we got all through the first 3 years of owning it was, it has a lot of potential. So that roughly describes the state. It was hadn't seen paint, I think, for 30 years. There was hardly any paint left anywhere on any of the woodwork outside, and a lot of these parts were gone. All these corners here were gone, and chimneys were not in too good a shape. But the house structurally was all there. It wasn't ransacked or gutted or anything.
What sort of things did you go through to restore the house?
Well, as you said, we've tried to restore it rather than just modernize and rebuild. And so one of the first things we had to do was put in central heating. There was no heating in the home at all when we purchased it. It was heated by either the fireplace or an oil-burning stove set in the front dining room here. And that was the only heat in the whole house. There was only running water in the kitchen, and there was a bathroom just off of that. And so we had to put in an electric furnace, insulate the whole house, because it's solid brick. The construction is solid brick, so the plaster's right on the face of the brick, and it's very difficult to insulate a house like that. So the entire upstairs, we built the insulation on the inside of the wall and then drywalled over top of that. Rewired the whole thing. We had all that done before we moved in December of 88. 87, okay. Having done that, we moved in, but that left all the painting and all the finishing work, the hanging of trim, the hanging of doors, finishing the kitchen off, all sorts of things like that had to be completed yet.
I understand there's an interesting story about the stained glass window over the doorway.
Well, yes, it's quite interesting. It was missing when we moved in. It was just boarded up with old lumber at one time, old plywood, really. It was really in awful condition. And then we started talking to some people that lived behind here. We knew that they had lived in the house prior to us having lived in it. And when the lady's father died, they had to clear out the house, and they found one of the panes of glass in the basement of the house. And so then we had an original model to work from. Yeah, one of the side lights with the original colored glass. There was quite a few pieces missing, but we managed to use all the ones that were still usable and put them in with the other two, the transom and the other side light that we had made. Mm-hmm. So there is original glass in there.
Your home is designated under the Heritage Act. How has this affected you in your restoration?
The Heritage Act designation has not been a problem at all for us, because we were wanting to restore it completely anyway in the old style, rather than to go and modernize it or anything like that. So we didn't know when we bought the house, well, when we started to look into buying it, we didn't know it was a heritage home. But it's not been a problem at all for us. In fact, it's been a help of anything with the grants that are available to you and the information that comes with it. So we've enjoyed it, and recently we've got our new plaque to show the designation of the house, and we've proudly mounted there beside the front door. So we talked about in the designation of the Heritage House that there are some things inside, and we'd like to come in, if you'd like to follow us, and we'll show you the inside areas that are specifically mentioned in the act.
Great, thank you.
Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
What room are we in now, Mr. Webenger?
This is the formal dining room in the house. It's the largest room in the house, and was the main principal room for the people in those days.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting cabinet you have there in the center of the room. Is that original?
That's an original cabinet, specifically mentioned in the heritage designation. We had to replace some of the panes, window panes in there, all with original glass. But the finish on it is still the original finish. After we washed it down after years of smoke, it came up fairly nice.
There's an interesting effect with the woodwork on the grain of the wood on the cabinet and on the doors in the room. Could you tell me something about that?
The base wood in this room is, and throughout the entire house, is pine, nice clear pine. And in the days when the house was built, it was very modern to build or to finish the woodwork with simulated grain, generally called graining. And in this room, they used rosewood on the darker color and tiger maple on the lighter colors in the room.
Now the glass doors on the cabinet, although they are original, they weren't originally in the house when you purchased it, were they?
And when we first moved in, there were no doors in front of the shelves there at all. And we had went through the effort of having new ones made more in the conventional rectangular window style. Then, as mentioned outside, when Mr. Carberry died, we were able to get a hold of these windows, which came out of storage in his basement. He had stored them there when they had been removed by former tenants. And so people knew that we were looking for them, and they gave them back to us, and certainly make an attractive addition to the room.
The windows in the room are certainly an interesting feature. I've seen a number of houses in Brampton, and I've never seen something quite so interesting as this. Could you tell me something about this window?
Normally in the houses in the Brampton area, houses with of this vintage, you'll find that they either have two separate windows in the front room or only one window on either side of the front door. This house here, they've combined them into a pair of windows in one large window frame, and so it's an interesting change to the house from the other ones. Here again we see the tiger maple and the rosewood finish on them.
The windows are very unusual around the doorway in the side of the room here.
Yeah, the side lights in the transom there are typical brick pattern, which you find in more homes in the area. When we originally moved into the house, those windows were not there either. They were covered up with a sort of a etched glass, and but we were able to obtain a copy of a picture that showed this original pattern in the side lights and in the transom there, and so we had those reproduced, and I used up some of my antique glass and put it in there, and lo and behold, we have a nice door now.
Should we go into the front hall?
Yeah, let's show you the side lights in the front hall now.
This is the interesting stained glass you have, which you mentioned outside.
Yes, here you can see some of the original panes in the middle of the center side light there. Just below the gun stock is the original pieces of the glass, and then we had reproduced in similar colors as best we could the remaining pieces that we needed. It's all leaded, which is very unusual for houses in this area. We'd never seen it before, but when the original side light turned up, we were convinced that the rumors we'd heard were actually true.
Now this entranceway here, would this have been the primary entrance, or just a sort of a ceremonial entrance for the original owners of the property?
Judging by the wear on the floorboards, which is a good indicator, there was very little traffic through the front hall. And whereas here there's hardly any wear on the boards, in the kitchen, at the main entryways, the boards were nearly completely wore through. So obviously the day-to-day traffic was in the kitchen, and probably formal visitors would come through the front door. So shall I take you upstairs and I'll show you the other end of the stairs here, and you can see the interesting hallway up there.
Great. Well, we're on the landing now. It's certainly quite an interesting wide open space here. It must be very conducive to a family atmosphere with all the doors opening onto one sort of space here.
Yes, this is the upstairs hall, and you can see the banister goes completely around the stairwell, which is again, I think a little unusual and quite a generous walk area around that. The upstairs bedrooms were symmetrical on the center of the house, with bedrooms on either side of the stairs being identical in size and shape and everything. At the end of the hall there we had the clothes closet. That was the only closet in the house. It went completely across the back of the hall. Since then I've subdivided it into 3 closets, but still the original door there, with the original paint, as you see in all the doors in the hallway here. Still the original finish, the way we found it when we bought it, and we believe it's the original because there's certainly no paint underneath it, and in those days people didn't strip paint, so we assume it's the original.
We can get a really good view of the floors up here. I understand that when you purchased the house, you were lucky enough that there wasn't a central heating system, so that the floors were intact, and they're all original, are they?
Floors are all original. They consist of pine boards about 1.5 to 1 3/4 inch thick, tongue and groove construction, vary in width from anywhere from about 5 to 7 inches wide, randomly. There's no set pattern to that. That was one of the biggest challenges during the construction of the reconstruction of the house, was how to get the heating ducts in the house without destroying the character of all the rooms, and we managed to do that by burying them between the walls and in between the floor joists.
Now, you have another set of stairs up here that leads to the kitchen, I believe. Is that correct?
That's right. They came from the back room, what we call the servants' quarters. That's where Mom and Dad sleep.
Although the house is very interesting and historic, you certainly don't want to compromise any of the modern conveniences, and you certainly done an excellent job here of balancing the two with historic conservation and today's needs as far as a modern kitchen. What sort of things have you done here to try and balance those needs?
Well, as you said, a modern kitchen is definitely a requirement. The problem with the old kitchens is the number of doors usually coming and going off them. In this particular case, we had 5 doors, one of which we had to block off in order to get room for a counter space. And so it's right over in front of the sink there now, so we have a window there instead of a door. And then access to the doors has to be maintained, so therefore we ended up with an island in the center of the kitchen. But thank goodness in the old days they had fairly large kitchens because they were central to the home, so we have plenty of eating space, and we're able to utilize all the trim from the original house and tried to make the cupboards blend in as well as we could with the original.
You've replaced the floor in here, but it does match close to perhaps what an original type style of floor would have been like. Could you tell us something about the flooring in here?
Yeah, this flooring now is oak, which is of course harder than the original pine. We found that at the 2 main entrances to the kitchen, the floorboards were almost completely worn through. So you can imagine over the years, 130 years or so, of traffic back and forth over these. The boards had worn 1.5 inches through the 1 5/8 wood. In some places they had patches underneath, so the floor was beyond restoring, so we had to cover it up with something a little harder and more durable.
The Odlum House is one of Brampton's most significant heritage structures. Thanks to the efforts of Bill and Rita Waibenga, the building has now received a new life. and will hopefully be there to tell the story of the Odlums and the Gore for many years to come. Thank you for joining me for Brampton Memories of a Small Town. Tune in again next week when we'll be looking at another segment of Brampton's fascinating history.
Funding for Brampton Memories of a Small Town has been brought to you in part by the Rotary Clubs of Brampton.
To comment on the preceding program, please call the response line 24 hours a day at 456-0860. Your comments are appreciated.